I never thought I'd be sharing something like this on Reddit, but I could use some advice. I'm a 62-year-old man, and my life has turned into some kind of soap opera. It all started with an inheritance from my father, but let me back up a bit and give you some context. I've lived in this city my entire life. I grew up in a modest home with my parents and two sisters. My father was a hardworking man who spent his entire career at the local steel mill. He started as a janitor and worked his way up to floor manager over the course of 40 years. My mother was a homemaker who occasionally took on seamstress work to help make ends meet. They weren't rich by any means, but they always made sure we had what we needed. I followed in my father's footsteps and started working at the steel mill right out of high school. It was there that I met my wife, Sarah. She worked in the office, handling payroll. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared love of classic movies and homemade pasta. We married young, at 22, and had our son Jake 2 years later. Sarah and I had a wonderful life together. We bought a small house not far from where I grew up, and we poured our hearts into making it a home. Sarah had a knack for finding beautiful, unique pieces at flea markets and garage sales. Our home was filled with these treasures, each with its own story. Tragedy struck when Jake was 20. Sarah was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. We fought it hard for 3 years, but in the end, we lost her. It was the darkest period of my life. Jake and I leaned on each other heavily during that time. He had just graduated college and was starting his career in software engineering. Despite job offers in other cities, he chose to stay close to home for those first couple of years after Sarah's passing. As time went on, Jake's career took off. He got an offer from a big tech company in another city that was too good to pass up. I encouraged him to take it, even though it meant he'd be moving away. I didn't want my loss to hold him back from his dreams. For the next few years, it was just me in our family home. I kept myself busy with work and my hobbies. I took up woodworking, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for when Sarah was sick. I made small pieces at first, picture frames, birdhouses, but eventually worked my way up to furniture. The garage became my sanctuary. Then, 5 years ago, Jake called me with exciting news. He was engaged to a woman named Phoebe. They had met at a tech conference and hit it off immediately. Jake brought her home to meet me a few months before the wedding. Phoebe was charming and vivacious, with a quick wit that reminded me a bit of Sarah. She seemed genuinely interested in our family history, asking about old photos and the stories behind Sarah's flea market finds. The wedding was a joyous occasion, the happiest day since we'd lost Sarah. Jake looked so handsome in his tux, and Phoebe was radiant in her gown. I remember giving a toast, my voice cracking as I said how proud Sarah would have been of the man Jake had become, and how happy she would have been to welcome Phoebe to our family. After the wedding, Jake and Phoebe decided that she would move in with me while Jake continued his work in the other city. The arrangement made sense. Phoebe worked remotely as a graphic designer, and this way she wouldn't be alone in a new city. I was thrilled at the idea of having company in the house again. At first, everything was wonderful. Phoebe and I got along great. We'd have dinner together most nights, and I taught her some of Sarah's old recipes. She even took an interest in my woodworking, and I showed her how to make some simple pieces. We had a good routine going, and I felt like I had gained a daughter. Then, last year, my father passed away. It was a peaceful passing. He went to sleep one night and simply didn't wake up the next morning. At the reading of his will, I was surprised to learn that he had left me 4 flats in an old building downtown. I knew he had done well for himself after retiring from the mill, investing in real estate, but I had no idea about these properties. After some consideration, I decided to move into one of the flats and rent out the others. The flat I chose was on the 3rd floor, with a nice view of the city park. It needed some work, but I saw it as a project to keep me busy. Phoebe helped me pick out paint colors and new fixtures. We spent weekends fixing up the place, and it started to feel like home. I found tenants for the other flats fairly quickly. There was an elderly couple on the ground floor, a young family on the 2nd floor, and a 30-year-old graphic designer named Tom on the floor below me. Tom seemed like a nice guy, quiet, polite, always paid his rent on time. Everything seemed perfect until about a week ago. Tom reported a broken faucet in his bathroom. I told him I'd come by the next day to check it out and schedule a repair. When I went down to his flat, I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. I could hear the shower running, so I figured he was in there and couldn't hear me. I was about to leave when I heard a woman's laugh. A laugh I recognized. I stood there, frozen, as I heard Phoebe's voice coming from inside Tom's apartment. At first, I thought maybe she was just visiting, but then I heard sounds that made it clear what was really going on. I felt sick to my stomach. I waited in the hallway, not sure what to do. When Phoebe finally came out, she looked shocked to see me. She started stammering excuses, but I cut her off. I told her I knew what was happening, and that I was going to tell Jake. Phoebe begged me not to say anything, claiming it was a one-time mistake. But I could tell from the way Tom looked when he came out that this wasn't the first time. I was furious and disappointed. I've always believed in honesty, and I couldn't keep this from my son. I went back to my flat and called Jake immediately. I told him everything I had seen and heard. Jake was silent for a long time, then said he needed to think and would call me back. I felt terrible being the bearer of such news, but I knew it was the right thing to do. About an hour later, Jake called me back. His voice was cold and angry, but not for the reason I expected. He told me that Phoebe had already called him, crying and saying that I had been making inappropriate advances towards her for months. She claimed that she had gone to Tom's apartment to escape me, and that I had followed her there and tried to force my way in. I was stunned. I couldn't believe Phoebe would make up such horrible lies about me. I tried to explain to Jake that it wasn't true, that I had caught Phoebe cheating, but he seemed reluctant to believe me. He said he was coming home the next day to sort everything out. After I got off the phone with Jake, I heard a commotion outside. I looked out my window to see Phoebe in the courtyard, crying and telling some of our neighbors that I had tried to assault her. I was in shock. How could she turn this around on me so quickly? I went downstairs to try and set the record straight, but as soon as Phoebe saw me, she started screaming and backing away, putting on a show for everyone. Some of the younger residents immediately came to her defense, glaring at me and telling me to stay away from her. A few of the older residents, who have known me for years, looked confused and conflicted. Mrs. Johnson, my neighbor for over 30 years, came up to me and asked if I was okay. I tried to explain the situation to her, but with Phoebe's continued theatrics, it was hard to get a word in. The next few hours were a blur. Rumors spread through the building like wildfire. By nightfall, it seemed like everyone had chosen a side. The older residents, who knew me well, seemed to be on my side, but many of the younger ones were firmly supporting Phoebe. I barely slept that night, dreading Jake's arrival the next day. How could I convince my own son that I wasn't the monster Phoebe was making me out to be? The thought of losing my son's trust was unbearable. I don't know what to do. I never imagined I'd be in a situation like this at my age. I've always tried to be a good father and a decent person. Now, because I caught my daughter-in-law cheating, I'm being painted as a pervert and a predator. I'm scared, confused, and feeling more alone than ever. Has anyone been in a similar situation? How do I prove my innocence when it's just my word against Phoebe's? How do I get my son to believe me? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1. It's been a week since my last post, and I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. Your kind words have been a lifeline during this nightmare. Jake arrived the day after my post, and things didn't go well at first. He came to my flat with Phoebe, which caught me off guard. As soon as they entered, Phoebe started acting scared, staying close to Jake and avoiding eye contact with me. It was surreal to see her put on this act, when just days ago we had been laughing together in the kitchen, trying to recreate Sarah's famous lasagna recipe. Jake looked torn. I could see the conflict in his eyes as he looked between Phoebe and me. He asked me to explain my side of the story again. I told him everything, just as I had on the phone. I even mentioned specific moments from the past few months, like the time Phoebe and I spent a whole weekend refinishing an old dresser I'd found at a yard sale. I hoped these details would remind him of the good relationship we had before all this. Phoebe interrupted several times, crying and accusing me of twisting things. She claimed that I had been making her uncomfortable for months, with lingering looks and accidental touches. It was all lies, but she was very convincing. I could see Jake struggling to know who to believe. The tension in the room was unbearable. Jake suggested we all go down to Tom's flat to confront him. I agreed, hoping Tom would tell the truth. But when we got there, Tom wasn't home. His neighbor said he had left early that morning with a suitcase. This seemed to make Jake even more suspicious of me. Phoebe suggested that I had warned Tom to leave, which was absurd. I hadn't spoken to Tom since the day I caught them. We went back to my flat, and Jake asked to see my phone. I handed it over without hesitation, knowing there was nothing incriminating on it. He went through my messages and call history, but found nothing suspicious. However, this didn't seem to convince him completely. He said he needed time to think and left with Phoebe. I was devastated. My own son couldn't decide whether to believe me or the woman who was cheating on him. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the building was tense. Phoebe had moved into one of my other flats, claiming she didn't feel safe near me. Some of the residents who had sided with her gave me dirty looks whenever I passed them in the hallway. Mrs. Johnson and a few other longtime neighbors tried to support me. They told others about what a good neighbor and person I'd always been. Mrs. Johnson even recounted the time I spent days helping her clear out her basement after a flood, refusing to take any payment. But it didn't seem to sway those who had already made up their minds. Jake was distant. He would come to check on me, but our conversations were strained. I could tell he was torn between his wife and his father, and it was eating him up inside. One evening, he broke down and told me about a memory from his childhood. He recalled a time when he was about 10, and I had caught him lying about breaking a vase. He said he remembered how disappointed I had been, not because of the vase, but because of the lie. He said I had told him that honesty was the most important thing in any relationship. "I'm trying to reconcile that memory with what's happening now, Dad," he said, his voice cracking. "I just don't know what to believe. I felt trapped in my own home. I stopped going out except when necessary, afraid of running into Phoebe or facing accusing glares from neighbors. My son, who I had always been close to, now looked at me with doubt in his eyes. It was one of the lowest points of my life. But then, something unexpected happened. A young woman named Mila came to my door. She introduced herself as Tom's ex-girlfriend. She had heard about the situation from a friend who lived in the building and said she had information that could help me. Mila told me that she and Tom had broken up because she caught him cheating with Phoebe. She had proof, pictures and chat logs on her phone. She showed me some of them, and there was no doubt it was Phoebe in those pictures. I was relieved but also angry. Angry that Phoebe had not only cheated on my son, but had then tried to destroy my reputation to cover her tracks. Angry that it had come to this, needing evidence to prove my innocence to my own son. Mila agreed to talk to Jake and show him the evidence. I called Jake and asked him to come over, saying I had important information. He arrived an hour later, looking tired and wary. When Mila showed Jake the pictures and messages, his face went through a range of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, a deep sadness. He asked Mila several questions, trying to verify the authenticity of the evidence. Mila answered everything patiently, even offering to show him the timestamps on the original files on her phone. After Mila left, Jake broke down. He apologized to me over and over for doubting me. I held my son as he cried, feeling a mix of relief that the truth was out and sadness for the pain he was going through. It reminded me of the nights after Sarah died when we would sit together in silence, both of us grieving but finding comfort in each other's presence. Jake confronted Phoebe that same day. I wasn't there for the confrontation, but Jake told me later that Phoebe had tried to deny everything at first. When faced with the evidence, she broke down and admitted to the affair, but tried to blame it on feeling lonely with Jake away so often. Jake moved out of the flat he was sharing with Phoebe and is staying with me now. He's initiated divorce proceedings. The truth has started to spread through the building, and many of those who doubted me have come to apologize. I'm relieved that the truth is out, but this whole ordeal has left me feeling drained and somewhat disillusioned. I'm glad to have my son back, but I worry about the long-term effects this will have on him and on our relationship. I'll post another update if anything significant happens. Thank you all again for your support during this difficult time. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and I wanted to share what's been happening. Things have calmed down somewhat, but we're still dealing with the aftermath of everything that happened. Jake has been staying with me this whole time. He's been working remotely, which has given us a chance to spend more time together and start rebuilding our relationship. It hasn't been easy. There's still some lingering tension from the period when he doubted me. We've had some long, difficult conversations about trust and communication. One evening, we were sitting on the balcony, watching the sunset. Jake turned to me and said, "Dad, do you remember when I was 12 and I wanted to quit the baseball team?" I nodded, recalling how frustrated Jake had been that season. He continued, "You told me that sometimes the hardest things are the most worth doing, and that giving up should never be our first option. I think about that a lot now." we've been. Trying to reconnect through shared activities. Jake has taken an interest in my woodworking, something he never really cared about before. We've been working on building a bookshelf together. It's slow going. Jake is all thumbs when it comes to handiwork, but the time spent together has been invaluable. The divorce proceedings are underway. Phoebe moved out of the building about 2 weeks ago. Before she left, she tried to apologize to me, claiming she never meant for things to go so far. I didn't say much in response. I think it's too soon for forgiveness, if that's even possible after what she did. As she was leaving, I noticed she was wearing a necklace Sarah had given her as a wedding gift. Part of me wanted to ask for it back, but I couldn't bring myself to speak to her any more than necessary. The atmosphere in the building has shifted. Most of the residents who sided with Phoebe have apologized to me. Mrs. Johnson organized a small gathering in the courtyard where several neighbors expressed their regret for jumping to conclusions. It was a nice gesture, but I'd be lying if I said it completely erased the hurt of being doubted by people I've lived alongside for years. During the gathering, Mr. Patel, who lives on the second floor, pulled me aside. He's a quiet man who I've never spoken to much beyond polite greetings. With tears in his eyes, he told me about how his own father had been falsely accused of something years ago in their home country and how it had torn their family apart. "I should have known better than to jump to conclusions," he said. "I hope you can forgive us." His words touched me deeply, and I found myself getting emotional as well. Tom never came back to the building. He sent someone to collect his things and mailed me his keys along with the last month's rent. I've since rented out his flat to a new tenant, a quiet grad student who keeps to herself. Every time I pass Tom's old door, I can't help but feel a twinge of anger and sadness at how one person's actions could cause so much pain. Mila, Tom's ex-girlfriend who provided the evidence that cleared my name, has become an unexpected friend through all of this. She stopped by a few times to check on us, and her kindness has been a bright spot in this difficult time. Jake seems to appreciate her support too, though I've cautioned him about jumping into anything new too quickly. Last week, Mila brought over some old photo albums she found while cleaning out her closet. They contained pictures of her and Tom from happier times. As we looked through them, she shared stories about their relationship, and how she had suspected Tom's infidelity long before she had proof. It was a bittersweet evening, but it helped Jake to hear from someone else who had been through a similar betrayal. I've been thinking a lot about the future. This whole situation has made me realize how quickly things can change, how relationships we think are solid can crumble. I'm considering selling the flats and moving somewhere new for a fresh start, but I haven't made any decisions yet. Part of me feels like leaving would be running away, while another part thinks it might be the best way to put this all behind us. Yesterday, I took a walk through the neighborhood where Sarah and I bought our first home. The house is still there, though it's been painted a different color, and the garden Sarah loved so much is gone. Standing there, looking at the place where we started our life together, I felt a mix of nostalgia and sadness. I couldn't help but wonder what Sarah would think of everything that's happened, how she would have handled this situation. Jake talks about moving back to his city once things settle down, but I can tell he's hesitant about leaving me alone after everything that's happened. I've assured him that I'll be fine, that he shouldn't put his life on hold because of this, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about being on my own again. There are still moments when the weight of everything that's happened hits me. Sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night, replaying events in my head, wondering if there were signs I missed or things I could have done differently. But then I remind myself that I'm not the one who did anything wrong. Last night, Jake and I were going through some old boxes I had brought from the house. We found a letter Sarah had written to Jake on his 18th birthday, to be opened when she was gone. In it, she talked about the importance of family and how proud she was of the man he was becoming. Reading her words now, in light of everything that's happened, was both painful and comforting. It reminded us of what's truly important. I'm taking things one day at a time. Jake and I are both healing, separately and together. It's a slow process, but I have hope that we'll come out stronger on the other side of this. The future is uncertain, but for now, I'm grateful for the support I've received and for the chance to rebuild my relationship with my son. Thank you all for your support throughout this ordeal. It's meant more than I can express. I'll update again if there are any significant developments, but for now, we're just focusing on healing and moving forward.